Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of our adventure in the Cold Bog with the Cult of Jingz. Now, last time we left off after a first look at Rimworld 1.4, we also defended our small village of Liviana against a horde of 91 man-hunting panthers, and miraculously we somehow made it out alive, even though the same could unfortunately not be said about a few champions of the Empire who were sent over to help us. Now, over the course of the last episode, we also once again gained enough ideology development points to once again evolve the Cult of Jingz, and that is exactly what we're going to start off today's episode with. I have read through all of your comments on the last episode, and I think I found a fitting meme for us to pick at number 4, and for a change that meme only has a medium impact, it is in fact going to be Rancher. I think of all the remaining ones here, that is the one that fits best, and it might also give us a few very interesting bonuses, although admittedly the overall gameplay impact will not be as noticeable as that of the other three. Reading through the comments, Proselytizer was actually a close second, but in my opinion the timing is just a bit off for that, as we have somewhat reached the point where I don't really plan on converting and subsequently recruiting that many more people. Of course, Tree Speaker Redini will continue to teach our ways wherever she can, but in the future those targets are mostly going to be prisoners, and with those she is usually still fast enough. Supremacist was also a popular choice, but I would like to save that or Raider for a more violent warmongering playthrough. At the moment, the Cult of Jingz does not really go out of its way to attack anyone who doesn't attack us first. I feel like our people just really want to live in the swamp and do their thing. Not to mention that with 2 specialist roles already filled, we don't have any room for the shooting or melee specialist anyway, which is arguably one of the best things that the Raider or Supremacist memes give. So Rancher it is, and that also unlocks the ranching precept, which cannot be changed. Now what this does is it first of all gives our colonists a small mood bonus, depending on how many animals we have around. The more, the bigger, the better, and our yaks, muffalos and grizzly bears definitely meet those criteria. Admittedly though, the more interesting things are the stat changes, as Rancher actually gives us a 20% increase to animal taming chance, animal gathering yield, and butchery efficiency. The doubled animal learning factor then will make raising and training animals much easier. However, very fittingly, all of this comes at the cost of a reduced plant working speed. Now, the important part here is that it is a speed reduction, not a yield reduction, so we'll still benefit from the harvest yield bonuses of our plant specialist Cocoa. And considering that our Devil Strand and more recently our Psychoid plantations are built around that, I would say that the bonuses and penalties here actually integrate moderately well. Now, there is a bit more to the meme, but this is the heart and soul of it. So, like I said, some good changes here, but likely not too noticeable. They will, however, make life for our dedicated animal handler Skwiggs much easier. Now, we are going to make a few more changes though, starting with setting up intense bigotry. I said earlier that the Cult of Jingz does not really go out of its way to conquer other people, but at the same time, that does not mean that they have to like those who come to us. As a matter of fact, with this precept, they very much won't. Now, for the most part, this is likely going to remain a flavor thing, but it should manifest itself here and there, especially in our attitudes towards prisoners, who are already not necessarily what I would call well treated. All other precepts will remain the same, but don't forget, just because we now have 4 memes does not mean that we can't reform the ideology further, so nothing here is really set in stone. For now though, this is what it is, and yes, we have also just unlocked the role of Animal Specialist, but unfortunately the game only allows for 2 specialist roles to be filled at any given time, and at the moment those are occupied by Leafheart Kevin, our Medical Specialist, as well as by the aforementioned Coco, our Plant Specialist. And for the moment I do believe that those 2 are a bit more important than having an Animal Specialist, although the Animal Specialist would get additional bonuses to taming and training, so it is definitely far from worthless. Now, that brings us to rituals, and we are going to make some changes here. Specifically, we are going to remove the funeral ritual. Now, I am by no means confident that we are going to finish this playthrough without actually losing anyone. However, for the past 28 episodes, this ritual has been sitting here contributing nothing, and unfortunately we can't use it on animals or allies. So let's get rid of it and add something that has been unlocked with the Rancher meme, as we can now hold animal sacrifices. Unfortunately, the total number of rituals is limited to 6, otherwise of course we could have kept the funeral. Either way, we'll name this the stake holding, and unfortunately I made a small mistake here typing it out. I'll see about getting that fixed for the next episode. Now, the reward for a successful stake holding will be a Psy-Focus recharge, which I think will become more and more useful as the number of Psycasters in our colony increases. And that is also why we are now applying this reward to a few other rituals as well, since we can of course not perform the animal sacrifice every single day. I believe it does have a 20-day cooldown. So the Big Bang Drum ritual will be set up to recharge Psi Focus now as well, while the Bark Brawl Gladiator duel, which we haven't actually used yet, already does. Finally then, the Festival of Trees Skylantern Festival will be changed as well, although going for Psi Focus again here feels a bit over the top, so instead we are going to use this to sprout more Gauranland seeds. I believe a few more Gauranland trees couldn't hurt, while we definitely do no longer need any more random recruits. A few more small changes then and we can finally get to the gameplay. I think it is time to at least increase the size of our altar from small to medium, and we're also going to add a large sculpture just to signify our status. So next to the smaller crafting of Cambia, we can now also make ourselves some swamp statues. Last but not least then, I think it's time to once again get rid of the preference for masks. More and more people in our colony are actually wearing proper helmets, and as our enemies get tougher and tougher, I would like to switch most of them over to that eventually. And that is it though, that is the new and reformed Cult of Jingz. Again though, this does not mean that this has to be the final version. If we happen to collect 16 more development points, we can reform it once again, and while we do not have room for a 5th meme, we could always change an existing one, or we could add, remove, or otherwise modify some of the other stuff. For today though, I think it's time that we finally start playing, so let's get to it. As you can see, our very first psychoid leaves have been harvested, and just in time, as summer is slowly coming to an end. With the recent changes to our ideology then, it is time to give our tree temple a small overhaul. However, just in that moment, a hunting donut drives a Timberwolf manhunter, and as you can see, our colonist does not really have a way out of this. So she does take a few scratches and bites here, but eventually manages to outrun the animal, and one more volley from the SMG is then enough to give her the kill. Our tailor Armando then creates a masterwork Muffalo wool tribal wear. He can add that to the pile of 13 others he has made over the last few days. All of this is done mostly to keep him busy and of course to keep his crafting skill high. And the events don't stop coming as our prisoner now suffers a heart attack. Now, if we don't treat this, this has the potential to be fatal, and while we do not necessarily need to recruit her, we do have some plans for her. So just as Thoraya finishes the construction of a bigger altar, and as Jack now finishes the first swamp statue, this one featuring an elder wearing a shoe, and after Freya casts her word of love power on Skwiggs so that she hopefully falls in love with Took, our prisoner finally ends up in the hospital and Leafheart Kevin starts the tending process. Now, the heart attack is an interesting one as it can go away on its own, while treatment is of course the better option and works in rapid succession, with every dose of medicine having the chance to lower the severity by 30%, albeit, as you can see here, even for someone as skilled as Kevin, only with a roughly 50% chance of succeeding. Ultimately though, our prisoner is saved and quite a bit of medicine is consumed, but again, there are some plans in place that will hopefully make it all worth it. On the following morning then, our tree temple overhaul continues, as we need to create a bit more space to move in our first and then eventually also a second swamp statue. Now, the swamp statue is not only just a little bit bigger, but actually comes with a unique advantage over the crafting of Cambia, that one being that it does not actually require the room to be floored. Our altar unfortunately does, and so does the crafting of Cambia, and having both of those requirements unfulfilled would cause 2 mood penalties for our colonists, which we should obviously try to avoid. So in a few moments, the crafting of Cambia will move elsewhere into a room that does fulfill those requirements. Until then, we can watch as Maniac angers the local wildlife, and then Randy subsequently angers all females in Liviana. A high-intensity psychic drone now strikes the Cold Bog and will bring down the mood of people like Thoraya and Coco, who can be seen harvesting more psychoid leaves here. So perhaps now is a good time to lift the Cult of Jingz's spirits. And we'll do that inside of our tree temple, which is suspiciously housing a couple of thrombohorns now. Thrombohorns which may or may not be used in the upcoming Bark Brawl. 2 of our 4 prisoners, not counting our psycasting prospect, will participate in this gladiator duel, among them the one who just recovered from a heart attack. And you can see it on the right, if a weapon is used and one of the 2 actually dies, then ritual quality quickly goes up, and that is exactly what we're hoping for, as a successful ritual will not only give us more ideology development points, but also recharge the psi focus of all psycasters in Liviana. And so, as the Cult of Jingz assembles in their place of worship, let us meet our contestants. On the left, accompanied by Tuk, we have a bloodlusty brawler with a melee skill of 7. However, she is also not exactly well fed and does have a few pre-existing injuries. On the right, accompanied by Chutney, we have our heart attack survivor, also a misandrist and with a melee skill of 11, however not further powered by the brawler trait. So let's kick things off then. The ritual starts with a few encouraging words from Skwiggs herself, before Miss Heart Attack is then the first to grab a weapon. A bit of dancing around and then both contestants go at each other, and it looks like our brawler is cut off and will not be able to make it to a Thrombohorn. And that is all the advantage that her opponent needs, and so the fight here ends after just a few seconds, with Lair on the left getting her head cleanly cut off. And so we have ourselves a winner and a good quality Bark Brawl to go along with it. We earn 1 ideology development point, everyone in the colony gains a +5 mood bonus for 6 days, and most importantly, everyone's psi focus is set back to 100%. Now there is one more stranger in our village who I have not yet mentioned, and that's this guy right here from the Empire who crash landed near the end of the last episode. And since he has recovered to a point where he can now walk again, let us simply kick him out. If he reaches the edge of the map, that will give us a nice relationship bonus, and we don't want him to join our ranks anyway. A few hours later then, our prisoner Robola goes berserk. As you know, she was once our slave, but then rebelled. That caused us to put her into prison, and that is where she still is. And after a quick intervention by our pacifying squad here, that is where she will stay for a little while longer, of course after Leafheart Kevin ensures that she doesn't die first. In the morning then, as Redini continues to convert our prisoners, our Imperial guest makes it off the map, and as a result, our relationship with the Empire moves a bit closer towards comfortable neutrality, although the next Neuroquake has a chance to change that. Now, since today's episode is all about advancing the Cult of Jingz, let's also work towards finding our second artifact, and quite some time ago we've picked up this quest right here, promising more information about the sword Redhawk in an ancient complex nearby. And in fact, the ruin is just a few tiles over, so let's assemble a caravan real quick. We'll send our resident Psycaster Freya together with Maniac and Chutney. Together with Muffalo's Cheeseman and Shadow Mage, they should make the trip quite quickly. Still, some camping equipment sure can't hurt, as we have no idea how big that complex actually is. Now, as the 5 of them make their way out of the village, a flash storm strikes the Cold Bog, and just a few seconds later, the first bits of our psychoid plantation are burning bright. Luckily though, the flash storm ends after just a few minutes, and Coco and Thoraya manage to beat out the remaining flames, and so we can now jump back to our village where our common room is getting a slight overhaul. This expansion fulfills 2 purposes, 1 making the room big enough to fulfill the requirements for the crafting of cambia, and 2 making it big enough to house a bigger table. Sharing only 4 chairs between 13 colonists has started to become a bit ridiculous, so we are now installing a setup that seats a few more people. Maniac, by the way, is still cooking fine meals, but he has switched over to carnivore fine meals. Those are not quite as resource efficient as the regular versions, taking up 60 ingredients instead of 40, but they preserve our berry supply, which has dwindled quite a bit and is now reserved for kibble production only. As midnight passes, the psychic drone is already over and fall has begun, and our small caravan has also met some people on the road. Luckily though, they are friendly, and after a quick look don't have anything interesting to trade, so we're moving on, or rather set up camp for the night. As Hunter Chutney is then chased by an angry warg on the next morning, we can also see that the flash storm has left its mark. That southeastern edge of the map is still burning fiercely. Luckily though, the river and the swampy terrain will likely keep the fire from spreading much further. A short while later then, we can also welcome a new grizzly bear to Liviana, and as always it will be named after a lucky patron supporter from the naming rights tier and above. This time Flozy joins our flock. And with Flozy preparing to be trained, the Empire sends us another quest, and before we make a decision I would actually like to hear what you think about it. For a total of 11 days we are supposed to house a duchess with 6 of her allies. We need to keep them well fed and happy, and they won't do any work, and they're also hunted by a pack of tribals. In total, we are looking at about 100 enemies here, but also at some potentially interesting rewards. For example, some valuable equipment or a new colonist, although Hamilton here does not really impress me all that much. At the moment, I am inclined to let this quest pass us by, but again, I'd like to hear what you think, so let me know in the comments down below whether or not we should take it. In the meantime, a quick kitchen overhaul begins and our caravan also arrives at their destination, and I think it's pretty clear where we need to go here. So let's not waste any time here and crack things open, which immediately reveals the first information terminal. We also have a security crate, and while Freya, the person with the lowest intellectual skill, already starts hacking, Chutney and Maniac take a look behind the other doors. On the right, a crate, but also a potentially dangerous unstable fuel node, a similar setup than in Chutney's room but also accompanied by a comms console, while Maniac discovers a nest of insects that we should ideally not disturb. Chutney then finds the second terminal, and the third one has also already revealed itself by that green glow below the comms console, but before we can get to hacking that, the fuel node here is causing issues. Good thing that we just discovered a door to the outside, but let's first activate the comms console because that thing is flammable, unlike the hermetic crate that is also in the room. 113 units of Panthera fur then drop down as Chutney starts shooting the steel door here. This will equalize temperatures between the outside and the room that is about to go up in flames, and it will prevent the adjacent rooms from heating up to uncomfortable levels. And that is exactly what we want to avoid, because it looks like that third terminal is next door, and while Chutney sets out to hack it, we also get the interesting news that Muffalo Cheeseman is pregnant. Looks like her and Shadow Mage have used the opportunity, as we normally keep our male and female Muffalos separate. So at least for them it was an enjoyable trip. Let's hope the same will be true for Freya, Maniac and Chutney, as the explosion now technically cuts Chutney off from his companions. Maniac then is the first to finish his hack and will immediately take over from Freya, simply because he is much faster at the job, and just as the two of them make the switch, Chutney finishes work on his terminal as well. At this point, he can now explore a bit more, discovering 3 ancient cryptosleep pods, and with no way of knowing who's inside them and whether or not they're friendly, I would say let's not disturb them. Unfortunately then, as he attempts to cut through the room on the right, a few things happen at once. Not only are we informed of insects now tunneling into the room, we also have another fuel node ready to explode. On the bright side, Chutney does make it past without getting blasted, and it looks like we have enough time here to also loot the crate, which reveals a joy wire, and this would actually be my second question to you today. Do you think we should install that on anyone? And if yes, who should it be? A few seconds later then, Maniac hacks the third terminal, and with that we have all we need, and it's a good thing we do, because raiders have just arrived. Now, they will likely run into the infestation, but this also means that we cannot simply reform our caravan now, and simply running off the edge of the map is also not ideal because it would leave our 2 Muffalos behind. Don't worry though, leaving by conventional means was never an option anyway. After all, we brought Freya and her fast skip ability along. Admittedly, with no control over our Muffalos, it was a bit difficult to find a spot with all people and animals inside of the effect radius, but ultimately Cheeseman and Shadow Mage stayed put for the 5 seconds it took Freya to cast it, and just a split second later everyone finds themselves back home in Liviana, inside of Thoraya's and Maniac's bedroom. Now, a bit earlier we talked about our psy-casting prospect Prisoner, and as you can see, he is not exactly happy right now. And since prisoner happiness has a direct influence on how hard it is to recruit them, we're now going to make life just a little bit nicer for them. So by moving him into a nicer room and feeding him fine meals, we should at least keep him out of mental break territory, and that should hopefully speed up our recruitment process at least a tiny little bit. Our new kitchen, meanwhile, makes full use of the new shelves introduced in the 1.4 update. It looks a lot cleaner now and actually also has much more storage space than before. The only challenge will now be to acquire enough food to last us through the winter. On the following morning then, Redini's next recruitment attempt is not yet met with success, but at least with improvement, reducing our prisoner's resistance by almost 2 points. Previously, she was lucky to get half of that. A lone wandering trader is then used to unload some old clothing and to purchase some medicine, before Skwiggs goes all out with the perks of the new rancher meme and actually successfully tames a wild grizzly bear. In the background we also had a quest pop up for a Thrumbo chase, but first let's give our new animal a name, and this time the name of patron supporter Cobra-matic was chosen. Now, at some point in the next few days, we could actually use ourselves a mid-sized tribal raid to feed all of those bears through the winter. The quest here won't supply that, but it could give us access to some more Thrumbo fur, although at the cost of a 5-day journey, potentially 4 if we take a few animals. Once again, let me know if that's something you would like to see us do. With temperatures slowly dropping off though, I'm not entirely sure if it's a good idea. For the time being though, we have more problems on the home front, as Skwiggs just tested her luck and attempted to tame another grizzly bear, and this time the animal bit back. That in itself is already unfortunate, but what's even more unfortunate is Skwiggs' headgear, as her bear headdress is now causing her to attack any hostiles she sees in a frenzied rage. And that includes this now man-hunting grizzly bear, which she obviously has no chance of beating in a fight, and with all of that happening at the other edge of the map, we have no other choice but to watch and let it happen. Luckily though, she does survive. The bear meanwhile is still man-hunting, so our rescue mission consists of 2 parts. First, Donut, Chutney and a late arriving Took lure the bear over to the other side of the map and kill it quickly, while Kevin makes it over to Skwiggs just in time to apply some herbal medicine before she bleeds out. Tent quality obviously won't be the best out here, but it looks like she will survive, but still the Cult of Jingz just had to kill a venerated animal. As a matter of fact, one of the last big animals on the map period. As you can see on the left here, at the moment the hunting forecast is looking rather disappointing. And for that reason, and just as a precaution, we are also switching back to just simple meals made from only meat. We do have more berry maker dryads coming along, but the process takes some time, and with freezing temperatures around the corner, I don't want to take any chances. And because of all those circumstances, spirits in Liviana might indeed be a bit low at the moment, so let us attempt to lift everyone's mood by having ourselves another Bark Brawl. This time we're having our other 2 prisoners going up against each other, and yes, we are suffering a massive quality penalty here from having performed the ritual just a few days ago. However, even if it ends up being terrible, the mood penalty will at worst only outweigh the mood bonus from earlier, and I simply don't want to wait another 16 days to get this over with. The reason being that all of these Bark Brawls are actually part of a tournament to determine who will get to become our second to last colonist. That last spot is of course reserved for our psycasting prospect. And so today we have going up against each other on the right side our former slave Robola, no fighting qualities worth mentioning and also with a plethora of patched up injuries, and on the other side a tough brawler with a melee skill of 12 and barely any injuries, albeit one step further away from the Thrombohorn, and who knows, that might end up being the deciding factor. As the fight then begins, Robola picks up the weapon immediately, but her opponent dodges expertly, and a second later both of them have a horn in their hands and start going at each other. The fight itself then is over quickly, only 2 hits and Robola goes down, no death this time, and that also explains the terrible ritual quality. Still, the -3 mood penalty here not even enough to outweigh the +5 from earlier, and more importantly, we now have our 2 finalists for the next episode. One of them unfortunately just went berserk again and needs to be pacified, so we'll have to see how evenly matched that final Bark Brawl will eventually be. For today though, with Redini wrapping up one last recruitment attempt and putting us in a very good place to actually complete the process next time, I think we have reached a great point to make the cut. So as always, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. If you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can of course go ahead and subscribe to stay up to date, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or check out and maybe even pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.